On Twilight's Wings, the Ecclesian Chronicles, Book 1, Ariel Paiement. For Alicia, who is always willing to read my writing. Chapter 1, Catarina. It always showed up at the oddest times, and it always manifested in her back. Cat curled into a ball on her bed in the shadowy attic. The burning blistered through her back again, making her feel as if she were boiling from the inside out. She bit her lip, digging her nails into her palms. The pain pricked like needles all over her skin and tore into her like the cords of a whip ripping into her back. She gritted her teeth and whimpered, "Must stay quiet." Sweat dripped down her palms, making them slick as time ticked by. She bit down on her lip too hard, and the tang of iron and copper filled her mouth. Tears coursed down her cheeks, but she clamped her hands over her mouth and held in the sobs. Black and yellow spots danced in her vision, and she felt the strange dropping sensation in the pit of her stomach that indicated another of the odd visions was coming on. If they were visions and not just hallucinations. But she quit taking the antidepressants and anything else that could cause them. How could they be hallucinations? She squeezed her tear-filled eyes shut when the shadowed attic began to undulate, pieces of furniture rippling and dancing in her vision. Unless there was something wrong in her brain, then hallucinations would make sense. She'd heard that could cause weird stuff like this. What would she see this time? When the light-headed sensation and the pain faded, she opened her eyes again. Cool rays of light and a darkening sky met her gaze. The cold, powdery sensation of fine sand seeped through her thin nightgown and eased any lingering burning sensation in her back. She lay there for a moment, letting her eyes shut and appreciating the peacefulness of the scene. Quietness like this was a rarity. She eased her sore body into a sitting position. Moonlight glittered over the surface of an open expanse of water, illuminating waves as they crested and crashed into the sand that stretched down the coastline as far as she could see. The moon's ghost-white rays lit the water in a mix of deep blue and black hues. She curled her toes into the sand, her nightdress fluttering around her. What was this place? Her gaze wandered across the empty expanse to fix on the cliffs looming in the distance, and the castle perched on top, dark and silent. That was familiar. But why? As she turned back to watch the waves, a dark shape blurred past. She gasped, scooting back. What was that? It almost looked like an angel. She pinched herself. An angel. She slumped down onto the damp sand, digging her fingers into it. I'm not dreaming, so how do I explain this? A high-pitched laugh bubbled out of her. It's official. I survived everything Uncle Levin threw at me, but now? She laughed again, the sound carrying across the empty beach. Now I'm going crazy. How stupid is that? She clenched fistfuls of sand, and her gaze shifted to the night sky, up to the twinkling stars. The moon presided over her surroundings, adding peace to the scene despite the turmoil she felt. What is happening to me? She whispered. Sunlight streamed in through the window, falling across Kat's face and forcing her heavy lids to flicker open for a moment before she shut them tight again. She moaned and threw an arm over her face. A hiss of pain escaped her, and she wished she hadn't moved. Places she hadn't known could ache did, and her back felt like someone had taken a cheese grater to it. This really had to stop. If only she knew what this was, she'd find a solution. Rolling over, she eased off the bed and limped across the room to where a floor-length mirror had been propped against the wall. Tugging up her shirt, she looked over her shoulder. twin stripes slashed down her back between her shoulder blades, puffy and red. What had started out as an insatiable itch had turned into a mild rash a few weeks ago. The last couple of nights, however, she'd been having the strange visions again, and the rash had worsened to these weeping gashes. Not again! She glared at the injuries. Too bad she didn't know what caused the stupid things, or how to stop it. Equally disappointing was the fact that the gashes always disappeared in a few hours. She slid out of the old shirt and slipped into the new one. Her fingers ran over a particularly fresh bruise on her lower right side. A hiss escaped her. She was going to be walking funny most of the day. Best to avoid town, so no one got any weird ideas. Man, Mrs. Sandora would kill her if Child Services asked questions again. She glowered at her reflection. If only glaring could scare away all her troubles. There's never anything to find anyway, she mumbled. No wonder the doctors asked so many questions. A glance at her face revealed slight splotches of blood on her lip, and a raw scab where she'd bit herself last night. She ran her tongue over the injury. The stale taste of iron lingered on her lips. Looking down at her palms, she sighed at the sight of crescent moon-shaped scabs. Lovely. Add that to the list of things I'll have to hide. Well, until they healed too, anyway. With a huff, she limped to the dresser beside the mirror and began tearing through her clothes for something suitable to throw over the t-shirt. She could hide the scabs on her palms with a hoodie and pretend she was cold. Wouldn't be the first time. She eased her arms into the hoodie and took a last look in the mirror. Good enough. She wobbled out down the stairs to the kitchen. Was it going to be obvious she had passed out last night? What if she looked sick? She bit her lip, tangling her fingers in the hem of her shirt. It'll be fine, Cat. Just fine. Just before she reached the kitchen, she forced the lymph out of her step and pasted a smile onto her face. Her foster mother set her morning coffee down and fixed her with a squinty-eyed stare. Finally! The fact that it's summer doesn't mean you get to slack off. I expect you up earlier from now on. Be thankful I bothered to feed you this morning. She plopped a ladle full of lumpy oatmeal into a bowl and shoved it across the counter at Cat. You better take out the garbage and clean this house up by the time I get back home tonight. Cat took a seat at the island and hung her head, swirling her spoon around in her oatmeal. Yes, Mrs. Sandora. Useless child. Her foster mother turned away and started packing her own breakfast. She stared down at the oatmeal. Gray, lumpy, and missing anything to make it taste good. So, the usual. And people wondered why she was so skinny. Cat choked down what she could handle anyway. A whine and licking at her bare legs alerted her to their dog's presence. Sandy perched beside her chair, ears perked and tail waving. Cat smiled, and when Mrs. Sandora rushed to the office, she lowered the bowl to the Golden Lab's level. Someone might as well finish what she couldn't. As long as they didn't get caught, it would keep her out of trouble. The dog gobbled up the remaining oatmeal, looking at her with big brown eyes when the meal was gone. She patted the dog's head and set the bowl down on the counter just as Mrs. Sandora returned with her laptop case. And while you're at it, make sure you don't touch the office this time. Last time you did, Mr. Sandora was annoyed because he couldn't find anything. He wasn't annoyed because he didn't even notice. Annoyed wasn't even in his vocabulary. She ducked her head, hiding the scowl on her face from Mrs. Sandora. Yes, ma'am. I'll leave the study alone. You'd better. She shook her head. I can't wait until you go back to school. We should have shipped you off to boarding school this summer like every other year. I don't know why my husband thought letting you stay here was a good idea this year. She sniffed, snatching the empty oatmeal bowl away from Cat. Tossing it into the sink of dirty dishes, She grabbed her breakfast and headed to the door. Her heels clacked on the oak floorboards. Cat gritted her teeth. Yeah, at least boarding school gets me away from you, she muttered. The old bat heard and stopped in the archway to the dining hall. What did you just say? Cat clenched her fists and tried not to lose her temper entirely. I said, at least it gets me away from you. You chose me, not the other way around, so I don't know why you always complain about me. Mrs. Sandora sniffed, her back straightening. You're an ungrateful brat, and I'm beginning to regret the kindness I showed you by taking you in. You never did it out of kindness. Young lady, don't you dare take that tone with me. Mrs. Sandora finally whirled to face her. You've said yourself that you took me in for the sake of appearances, although God only knows why, because everyone already thinks you're perfect. Tears welled in Cat's eyes, but she gritted her teeth and refused to let them fall. How dare you suggest that I did it for such dreadful reasons? Suggest? You tell me your reasons all the time, so I'm stating facts as you presented them. You're such an arrogant brat. Mrs. Sandora's upper lip curled. That didn't even deserve a response. Cat shoved her chair back, and Sandy scrambled out of the way, nails scraping on the flooring. Stopping her feet on the floor, she stood and stormed past her foster mother. Mrs. Sandora grabbed her arm. Where do you think you're going? Why do you care? I'm just in the way, right? I'll be back to clean the whole freaking house later, when I feel like being a maid. Maybe I should give you back to the orphanage. Mrs. Sandora's grip tightened. I could take in a more submissive child who appreciates all I do for them. You're a hag. Cat yanked her arm out of Mrs. Sandora's clutches and marched toward the door. Mrs. Sandora's nasally voice stopped her in her tracks for a moment. Don't you dare look at me like you're the victim here, young lady. It's about time someone corrected your foul. She slammed the door, cutting off Mrs. Sandora's screeching, and ran for the woods. She sprinted across the road, skidding to a stop as a moving truck blared its horn at her and swerved into the driveway next door. Then she was on her way again, rushing for her place of safety.